Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by the 5-day Vendor Master File Cleanup. Do you trust the data in your vendor master file? Well, if you have less than 5,000 active vendor records and need to prepare for a vendor self-registration portal or for 1099 and 1042 IRS annual forms distribution, you are in luck. We have vendor validations including watch list screening, duplicate vendor review, vendor inactivation recommendations, and more. Go to DeborahRRichardson.com. That's DeborahRichardson.com/consulting, or email me at Deborah, DEBRA, at DeborahRRichardson.com for a quote today. So in today's episode, Wilton White of Diversified Robotic is making a return to the podcast with 2 Robotics Process Automation or RPA use cases, and he also tells you how to avoid bot abandonment. Yes, that is a thing. Bot abandonment. So make sure you stay for that, and then make sure you stay through the end since Wilton has a special offer for all Putting the AP in Happy podcast listeners. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 55, Digital Employees in Accounts Payable, 2 use cases for Robotics Process Automation or RPA. My guest today is Wilton White, who was a podcast guest back on episode 39, where we talked about robotics process automation, and he is the CEO of Diversified Robotic, a technology company that works with all size businesses, but really focuses on small to medium-sized businesses, leveling the playing field for technology. Welcome back, Wilton. Can you talk about your background for those listeners that didn't listen to your first interview on in episode 39 back in July, and then talk a little bit about what Diversified Robotic has been up to since then?
Well, first of all, Deborah, thank you for inviting me back. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again. And so from the last time we spoke, we've been quite busy. And so for those who were not part of the listening audience for episode 39, a little bit about my background. I'm an engineer by trade, and I did wireless engineering for close to 25 years. The last several years I was with AT&T, and they trained me on a lot of different disciplines such as cloud computing, this RPA, software-defined networks, and a bunch of disciplines that are really common in today's world when it comes to technology. By doing this, I realized that this RPA was a game changer. I became a subject matter expert within AT&T with it, decided to branch out on my own, and so I went out and recruited a couple engineers that I've worked with throughout my past, and we put the business model together and started Diversified Robotic. And we've been helping businesses be able to compete by allowing them to actually utilize this technology, but removing the cost barrier that most small and medium-sized businesses face when they try to get engineering support for these new technologies.
Yeah, and last time we really went into depth about robotics process automation or RPA and how that technology helps streamline like accounts payable tasks by creating what you call digital employees, which I love, or the bots, and they perform those tasks or really even specific steps of a larger process, those things that don't require a decision. So can you just expand on that? And then I know you have a case study or two to share with us today.
Sure. So as you mentioned, these digital employees, they add value to any organization by allowing the organization to utilize automation in a way that's never been done before. As you mentioned, there may be steps within a process that a bot can fulfill, maybe something that is similar to having a regular employee or assistant that you give assignments to. So it doesn't mean that they have to complete a task from A to Z. They maybe do A through F, and then it sends the information to a human, then comes back and it do P through Z, right? So the thing is, the tool itself allows for some one of it is a rapid deployment. You can build these things rather quickly and simply. If you're from the engineering side, it's quickly and simply from the engineering side. But also the impact of it is it allows you to do things you couldn't do before. And we'll get into some of that on the use cases. I have a couple that we were able to come up with that applies to your audience. But when it comes to being able to be utilized uh, in the financial services world, they're very prominent indeed.
So what's the first case study you have?
Well, the first case study I have, the client is they create dealerships, they make dealerships for automobiles. And what they do is they have these different parts they order from their employees. And they do it through an application called Fleetmatics. So they create these POs and they order these different tools and parts. A lot of times, some of those tools aren't already in the system, so they have to create them and order from a new vendor. So you have all these POs that are generated and all this information, and it has to be put over into their Sage software. And Sage and Fleetmatics don't speak to each other. So this was usually done manually. So what a bot does, it checks every 15 minutes to see if there's any new POs generated. It takes all the information and puts it into Sage. One thing it also does is a lot of times when these POs are being generated, they may put in what the tax may be according to what they think. So these are the different service assistants putting this tax in, but Sage actually has the correct tax for each jurisdiction. And so the bot will go and compare it. If it finds out that the Fleetmatics number is wrong, it'll go back and update it. As these POs are being processed, the equipment comes on board. Now all of a sudden you have to service the invoice. Invoice comes in, it's getting paid. The bot continues to go back to Fleetmatics and make sure it's received in, and it balances on both sides to make sure that the invoices are closed out and all the different reporting is done, giving everybody an update that the invoice has been closed. They also supplement that with reporting of open invoices. Also, they do another report to find out if there are new tools that are being added to Fleetmatics, because it can go and check to see what was added, because it's not going to be in the Sage component. So now they're allowing themselves to actually capture more data that they couldn't capture before, because the bot's doing the back and forth, and they can understand what's missing, what's new, and what has to be adjusted. So it opens up a whole level of discussion about business intelligence. How better can we control inventory? How better can we speed up the process? So now these different avenues of understanding come to light, because now these bots are keeping track of everything that's going on between the two.
So it's not just that you're taking a process that was manual and automating it in the sense that these POs are generated in Fleetmatics and they're not in Sage. And so you're adding those POs into Sage, and then you're also tracking when the invoices come in and updating those POs back in Fleetmatics. But you're also identifying some intelligence where, those folks that used to manually key in, that PO information, now they can level up and start looking at other aspects of the process and applying some intelligence to that.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what's taking place. When you have the bots start to handle one level of tasks, as you say, you level up, and now you can actually use the bot as, again, like your assistant that's doing this work. And you're basically looking at the output of that. And now you're being more an analytical standpoint of making decisions and managing the bot. And so those are the different value propositions you get when you start adding automation to your networks.
And I know you mentioned Sage for this particular case study, but it really doesn't matter what accounting system or ERP, or does it?
No, and that's a good point, Deborah. So when it comes to RPA, anything in the digital domain, the bot can handle. So whether it's old legacy software, whether it's brand new software, web applications, it doesn't make a difference. If a human can do it on a computer, a bot can do it.
Digital employee.
Yep.
All right. So what about case study 2?
Case study 2 is more reporting. It's more driven by a big construction company in LA. They handle quite a bit of large projects, and they're very keen on getting their reporting mechanisms clearly defined. So, of course, when you're dealing with construction, every dollar counts and every vendor margin counts. So having this clear reporting helps. They had a system where they were doing this reporting once a week, and then they have a big report that was due once a month. It was a lot of heavy lifting internally by a couple of analysts. So we had built a set of bots to go in and take a look at their crystal reporting, some of the other information it was grabbing from databases, and then also some of the projected numbers they were getting from their project managers, and combining that all together in a manner that was good for them for analysis. And that included, the different POs and invoices that were generated from the different projects that they had going on. So again, the purpose of the bot was to alleviate a lot of this data aggregation and compiling of reports and being able to grab from any domain and then go ahead and format it any way you want to be able to use that as business intelligence.
Yeah. And, back when I was a practitioner, when we needed to analyze any information, I'll use compensating controls for those accounts payable teams that don't have enough team members for segregation of duties. And so there are some compensating controls where you would have to, or we would have to go into the system, accounting system or ERP, and we would have to download a couple of different reports because we didn't have custom reports in that particular system. And then we had to, download them in Excel, and then we would have to combine both of the reports, and then we would have to review them, and then we would give them to our director at the time, and then they would use that to approve, the payment cycle. And so, someone every time a pay cycle was run, which I think at that time we had a couple of them running weekly, had to rerun that report or both reports, and then do that analysis or formatting of both of those reports, and make them into one and give them to the director, and that was done each time. So where I see this could help is just like you said with the reporting, that could be a bot where, the bot could go in, create the reports, and just email them to the director without interference at all from an accounts payable employee.
Absolutely. I mean, you described the use case a lot more clearly than I did. That is similar to what this bot is doing, where it's grabbing this data and compiling it in a manner where it can be utilized by other decision makers. And the thing about these type of use cases is they show themselves pretty much throughout any organizations at various levels. Whether you're looking at a bot to handle very simplistic reporting or very complex reporting, or even doing some management of payroll or payment cycles. All those different strategies can be at least had added value put upon them with the deployment of a bot.
Yeah. So can we talk about something? And you and I were talking offline about this before, and I wanted to bring it up because I know that RPA and the software that's been available to build bots, some accounts payable departments have, they have the software. And I did a couple of blog posts or podcasts about, RPA software and how to identify what projects that would be eligible for RPA. But I will say that as a practitioner, I was not trained in them, but I was given the opportunity to have an employee trained. And so I went through and identified a long list of what I thought were eligible projects. And they really were. And we put a couple of them into production. We launched them. And subsequent to that, the employee that had originally created the bot, the only one that I had trained, left the company. And so that kind of reminded me of back in the day when, and I'll date myself here, but when we all got that Access database on Microsoft Office, we created a bunch of databases, and then, we left the company and those databases were just there. And so can you talk a little bit about how, your company, if other small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses find themselves in that same scenario, how can you help them with these bots that have been created, and maybe they break or maybe they don't, but they may need maintenance on them either now or in the future. How can you help with that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Deborah. And also, that's a very good analogy, comparing it to the Access databases of old. Well, you're right in the sense that whenever you create a bot, it is a technical layer of code, right? And so if no one is there to manage that code, it can break. Websites change, applications change. It's just like if someone built an Excel macro, they don't know VBA script. If they just did a record and stop on Excel, if it breaks, they're gonna have problems. They don't know how to debug it. So that's the common thing you see in RPA. You see a lot of companies try to self-teach or get a person on staff to help RPA, and that may help in the short term. But what we'll find is that they're not having a holistic approach to how they're going to solve that workforce, because a digital employee becomes a workforce, right? You need managers, you need operators, you need maintenance people. Right. And so for us, what we did different is I come from a wireless background. And in wireless, we had a team called a NOC team, NOC. That stands for Network Operations Center. And they were responsible for all the performance within the network. So let's say there's an outage in, Miami, right? Immediately the NOC goes in, whether it's dealing with telco, it's dealing with wireless or satellite, whatever it may be. They have all the different subject matter experts there to be able to solve those problems quickly, right? Quickly, and get it back in service quickly. Well, I took that model and I built it into my business. So I'm one of a few RPA companies, I don't know of any others that exist, that actually has a NOC team. So what that means is once you bring us on board as a vendor of yours, when we build these bots at the subscription model, again, you're paying this low monthly fee. Your bots are being monitored 24 hours a day. So we have a 24-hour monitoring cycle. If anything happens to that bot during that period of time, the NOC responds and gets that bot up and running within a matter of minutes. We have right now on our KPI showing, I think we have a 99% success rate on bots. We run about 86,000 a month. And that 1%, when they do break, the NOC responds, finds out if there was a change in a website, a password change, or it could be something as simple as the password change on a certain application. And then once it does solve the problem, it's back in order. It makes a change to the code, and we notify the client that we had to make a change. But that is what makes us unique. You can find yourself, if you're trying to do it through a self rollout, having that type of abandonment issue for bot abandonment if
Yeah.
something does break. But here we're offering a solution where once we build it, we monitor 24 hours a day for you.
Yeah, and I think that's really, again, important to note because, you're not just for those businesses or companies that are looking to create a new bot. You also can provide services for those that have abandoned bots as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that
Great.
allows us to, again, uh, distinguish ourselves in the market because generally RPA is sold as a software where you can have to pay for their developers to come on site and build for you, where you're paying
Hmm.
a premium for, or they teach you how to build bots yourself. And then you're reliant on your staff being able to be maintained in that same position and be able to have a managed view of all the bots within your organization. And both of those
Yeah.
are very short-sighted views. And
Hmm.
I think combining the 24-hour knock along with the expertise that we have has provided a very unique solution to our clients.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly important in the accounts payable space because the focus in, that transactional, accounts payable operation is really to get the invoice paid, especially this time of year because we're going into year end. And so maintenance on a bot is probably not up on that priority list.
Correct.
So I know last time, episode 39, we really talked about what the process was to implement the bot. And so, again, I'll encourage any listeners that haven't listened to episode 39 to take a listen to that. It's really some good detailed information. But just at a high level, Wilton, can you talk about just how long does it take from start to finish and what type of model you have?
Sure. So we have a very simplistic model. We try to make it easy on the client. So we start off with a simple kickoff meeting. It's
Mhm.
generally 30 minutes to an hour. It's mainly a discovery meeting, trying to identify opportunities as well as a formal introduction between the two organizations. And then once we identify what we want to build, we move that to a design meeting. You get on the call with a solution architect. We talk about the specific process, and then we ask you to share your screen and walk us through how that process would normally operate. Once we had a design meeting, we take that video along with some workflow notes. We send it over to our developers, and then once we get the credentials, whatever else needed to get access, we build that bot. Generally, the bot building takes about anywhere from 2 weeks to 2.5, 3 weeks for complex ones, but on average, it's averaging around 2 weeks. After that 2 week period, we circle back with the client. We do a demo of the bot. They go ahead and give it the blessing. We go ahead and put it in production. We allow them to have the bot run in our organization for a couple of weeks, generally 2 weeks. And then after the 2 week trial, then they can decide if they want to keep it on. If they do, we sign a contract for a low subscription cost. If not, we go ahead and terminate the bot. Uh, we built that model because we felt that if we took all the liability on ourselves, we're doing a design, we're developing, and we're deploying the bot at our cost. There's no cost to the customer up front.
Mhm.
It allows us to be able to teach our clients because technology requires educational platform. You think about anything you're getting on the technology space, you have to learn something. It's very intricate. And so from the other services that we offer, we felt this was the best way or the gateway to be able to educate our clients how technology could impact their business. So that is the 5-step program. We go through a kickoff meeting, a design meeting, then it goes to development, it goes to trial, and then it goes into production once we sign the contract.
Yeah, and so it sounds like from kickoff through the 2 week trial, you're looking at what, a 4 to 6 week, depending on the complexity of the bot?
Generally, it's about 3 weeks. So generally, we have the kickoff meeting, and once we decide what we want to do, move forward, we usually schedule a design in next week,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there, once the trial goes, you're talking about a 5 week period from kickoff with to production. Yep.
That's absolutely great. So we've got a special promotion for listeners for the Putting the AP in Happy podcast. Wilton, you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. So because Deborah is so special to us, we decided to,
of course,
we wanted to extend the trial to all her listeners. So we give a 2-week free trial for all our clients that sign up through our sales agents and through our website. But the call to action on Deborah's side is actually 3 weeks. So if they go to a website, a web landing page we created for her, it's apandhappy.diversifiedrobotic.com. You can fill out the form there, and if you're fill out the information, a salesperson will get in touch with you, and then you'll be able to get a 3-week trial. So we'll be able to build a bot for you and let it work for 3 weeks in your organization to see how it impacts your business.
On behalf of my listeners, I thank you for that. That extra week is absolutely great. So we've got the apandhappy.diversifiedrobotic.com, and I will put that in the show notes. Listeners, if you want to go over and sign up for that demo, you can get that kickoff meeting started. So Wilton, is there anything else you want to talk about?
You know what? I'm going to do something a little off here. So I told you we were talking offline that one of my childhood schoolmates was listening to your podcast and heard me on here. So I want to go ahead and give her a shout out now in case she listens to the next episode. So this one's for you, Tony, if you're listening this time.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate you being a listener of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Wilton. I really appreciate you coming back to the podcast. And again, I thank you for that extra week for our listeners.
No problem, Deborah, anytime.
So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 55th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.